Salam, peace be upon you. My name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase. Part 17, Complexity Growth and Semantic Density. Remember the language we are learning. There is one field, phi, the holophase, the single cyclic movement from which all reality unfolds. When phi differentiates, that one movement generates its first derivatives, and with them, the three dimensions appear at once. Time as omega, space as k, and motion as v. From that first differentiation upward, every higher derivative is an echo of the one beneath it, an infinite ascent of finer and finer reflections of phi's original movement. And because the dimensions are born from that first echo, time, space, and motion also reverberate into infinity, carrying phi's unfolding into ever deeper rhythms, structures, and flows. Thus, the entire universe, every law, every pattern, every force, every particle, every phenomenon, is nothing but phi, endlessly echoing through its derivatives and their dimensional shadows. All of existence is the infinite echo of one field. Today, we listen to just one of those echoes. In our last journey, we listened to the echo of traveling shapes. We watched how wave packets, lumps of coherent oscillation, journey through space-time, their envelopes spreading, focusing, and transforming as they travel. We discovered that the story of a packet's shape change is a symphony played by many derivatives working together. But that symphony can be simple or intricate. Some traveling shapes use only a few notes in the language. Others use a rich section of the orchestra. Today we ask, what creates this difference? Why are some patterns simple and others dense with intricate detail? We turn from the story of traveling shapes to the story of semantic density itself, the thickness of meaning inside a pattern. We explore complexity growth. We learn how adding higher derivatives to the description of a phi pattern is like adding adjectives, clauses, twists, and side stories to a sentence. It increases the information density of that pattern. Today, we map the landscape between simplicity and intricacy within the holophase language, from the simplest whispers of reality to its richest and most elaborate stories. From simple whispers to rich stories. Let us begin with two sounds you can easily imagine. First, imagine a pure, steady tone from a tuning fork. It hums at a single, unchanging pitch. In our language, this sound can be described almost entirely by one number, its frequency, omega. It has a simple amplitude, a simple rhythm, and no additional structure. This is a pattern with very low semantic density. Now imagine a human voice saying your name with emotion. The pitch rises slightly on one syllable and falls on the next. The volume swells and then softens. There may be a soft breath before the word, a slight vibrato, a gentle rasp at the end. This sound cannot be captured by a single omega. We need omega for the basic pitch, but then we also need alpha, the change of that pitch in time, and perhaps jerk and higher derivatives to describe how that change itself speeds up or slows down. If we also care about how the sound spreads across space, we need K, curvature, and their higher spatial derivatives. Both sounds, the tuning fork and the spoken name, come from the same alphabet of phi's derivatives. But the second sound uses more of that alphabet. It awakens more levels of the temporal tower and more nuance in the spatial tower. That is complexity growth. In the holophase framework, a pattern's semantic density is a measure of how many rungs of the derivative ladders are actively shaping it. A low-density pattern is governed almost entirely by omega and k, simple, almost ideal waves. A high-density pattern has significant contributions from many higher derivatives, from alpha and jerk to higher spatial curvature terms and mixed derivatives, all at once. A simple sine wave tells a minimal story. I oscillate, I repeat, I do not change my character. A complex modulated wave tells something like this. I begin softly, rise in amplitude, my pitch drifts upward, then my oscillations slow while I spread in space and decay, and I do this in an asymmetric, textured way. The second is a much richer sentence in the language of reality. Today, we learn to see where a phenomenon sits along this spectrum, when the universe is speaking in short, clean phrases, and when it is delivering long, dense paragraphs of meaning. Do. Linguistic role. How large is the vocabulary? In ordinary language, we can describe the same event with very different levels of detail. You might say, a bird flew. That is a low density sentence. Subject and verb, almost no extra information. You could instead say, a small, iridescent hummingbird, its wings a shimmering blur, darted nervously from one crimson flower to another before vanishing into the thick green canopy. Now the vocabulary is much larger. Adjectives, adverbs, and clauses pack a lot more detail into the description. Both sentences are correct. Both describe a bird flying, but they live at different levels of semantic density. The same idea holds in the holophase language. If you only use omega and k, you can say, a wave oscillates and propagates. That is like a bird flew. If you include alpha and curvature, you can say, a focusing wave accelerates its rhythm and bends inward as it travels. If you include jerk, snap, and higher curvature terms, you can say, a sharply peaked wave packet with an asymmetric leading edge chirps upward in frequency as it moves, its envelope spreading at first and then refocusing through nonlinear self-interaction. It is the same pattern described with more or fewer words in phi's derivative vocabulary. So semantic density is simply this. How large a portion of the derivative dictionary do we need to tell the truth about a given pattern? A pattern that can be fully described with only the first derivatives is low density. A pattern that forces us to climb up to the third, fourth, or fifth derivatives in time and space is high density. On the master tree, this is a vertical question. For any given phenomenon, we ask, how far up the temporal tower must we climb? How far up the spatial tower? How deep into mixed derivatives? The answer tells us how dense, how information-rich that phenomenon is. 3. Scientific essence. Derivatives as constraints. Why does adding more derivatives increase complexity and information? Because each derivative acts as an extra constraint on how the pattern can behave. Imagine you are tracking the position of a point phi as a function of time. If you know only where it is right now, the future is almost completely unconstrained. It could go anywhere next. If you also know its velocity v, you know the direction and speed of its immediate motion, and suddenly a large part of its future path is constrained. It must follow that direction, at least initially. If you also know its acceleration, alpha, you now know how its velocity is changing, so its path must curve in a particular way. If you know jerk, the change of acceleration, you constrain how that curvature itself evolves. Each derivative is another piece of information that narrows the set of possible futures. In the same way, a pattern that is significantly influenced only by omega and k is loosely constrained. It has very simple, repetitive behavior. A pattern whose behavior depends strongly on alpha, jerk, and higher derivatives is tightly constrained. It must follow a more specific, structured path through time and space. Its behavior is detailed, non-generic, and loaded with information. We can see this operationally. Suppose we observe a complex signal, a light pulse, a voltage trace, a sound. We try to model it using only first and second derivatives. We assume it behaves like a simple oscillator with some basic spreading. The model may capture the rough outline, but it will miss the sharp turns, little kinks, sudden frequency jumps, or asymmetric tails. Those leftover details are precisely where higher derivatives live. So semantic density is not an abstract idea. It is the residual structure that remains after we subtract the contribution of the lower derivatives. The more residual structure remains, the more higher order derivatives are involved, and the higher the semantic density. 4. Dimensional expression. Complexity in time, space, and motion. True complexity is never confined to a single dimension. A high-density pattern reveals its richness in time, in space, and in motion. In time, semantic density appears as rhythmic intricacy. A low-density temporal pattern is like a metronome, steady ticks at a constant rate. It is described almost entirely by a single omega. Its graph is a pure sine wave or perfectly periodic pulse train. Examples include an ideal clock, a perfect tone from a tuning fork, or a hypothetical pulsar with no noise. A high-density temporal pattern has an evolving omega. Alpha is non-zero, so the pitch drifts. Jerk is non-zero, so the speed of that drift itself changes. Snap contributes further nuanced shifts. The waveform becomes a complex tapestry, rising and falling pitches, sudden slides, irregular intervals. We hear this in a bird song, in jazz improvisation, in the rich phonetic shapes of human speech. Such patterns cannot be predicted by knowing only their current frequency. We must know how that frequency is changing and how that change itself is changing. In space, semantic density is textural richness. A low-density spatial pattern is smooth and repetitive. It could be a simple sinusoidal grating, a flat plane, or a perfectly regular wave in a long canal. K is constant. Curvature and its higher derivatives are nearly zero. The shape is predictable and uniform. A high-density spatial pattern has structure at many scales. Curvature changes from point to point. Higher spatial derivatives are non-zero. The surface may have ridges, fine ripples, and fractal-like detail. Think of a mountain range with cliffs, valleys, ridges, and scree fields all mixed together. Think of the detailed structure of a leaf, or the intricate branching pattern of a river delta. The local wave number changes from place to place, and its manner of change is itself structured. In motion, semantic density shows up as trajectory sophistication. A low-density trajectory has constant velocity or constant acceleration, a straight line or a simple parabola. Think of a ball rolling down a smooth ramp without bumps, or a satellite in a nearly circular orbit under a central force. The motion is regular and easy to predict with low-order derivatives. A high-density trajectory has varying acceleration, non-zero jerk, and possibly varying jerk as well. The path might spiral, wobble, twist, and change curvature in complex ways. You see this in a leaf swirling through turbulent air, in the erratic path of a dust particle in a chaotic flow, or in the detailed precession of an orbit in a strongly curved spacetime near a massive body. In all three dimensions, the story is the same. The more derivative levels you need to explain what you see, the higher the semantic density of the pattern. V. Position in the master tree, vertical depth. On our master tree of derivatives, we have explored many branches. The temporal tower, phi, omega, alpha, jerk, snap, and beyond. The spatial tower, phi, k, curvature and its family, higher curvature drift, and further levels. The mixed tower, phi, mixed second derivatives, higher mixed structures. Each of these towers extends infinitely upward. So far, we have mostly explored which branches exist and what they mean. Now, complexity growth forces us to look at how far up each tower a given pattern extends. Semantic density is not a new branch. It is a meta-property. It tells us the height at which a particular phenomenon lives within these towers. A very simple pattern might live only on the first and second rungs. A richly structured pattern might need rungs 3, 4, and 5. In Chapter 4, Higher Order Semantics, Part 15 introduced the existence of these high rungs: jerk, snap, higher curvature. Part 16 showed us how these rungs combine to create envelope evolution, coherent traveling shapes. Now, in Part 17, we realize that the use of these higher rungs is what makes some patterns simple and others extraordinarily detailed. So on the master tree, complexity growth is the vertical dimension of meaning. It measures how deeply a pattern draws from the infinite derivative library to express itself. 6. Relations to neighboring branches. Complexity growth is tightly connected to several other key ideas in the Holophase language. It is directly tied to all derivative towers: temporal, spatial, mixed, and even topological or defect-related structures. A pattern with high complexity simply has non-negligible contributions higher up these towers. It is in constant dialogue with envelope evolution. A wave packet with simple envelope evolution, a gentle spreading, a mild focusing, may be describable with just second derivatives of the dispersion relation. But a wave packet whose envelope splits, skews, and forms smaller subpackets, or interacts in intricate ways with the medium, requires higher derivatives and perhaps nonlinear effects, indicating higher semantic density. It is closely related to stability and instability. Many low-density patterns, like simple harmonic waves, are very stable and robust. Many high-density patterns are fragile. They depend on precise balances and collapse back to simpler forms when disturbed. It is deeply connected to information theory. A low-density pattern is highly compressible. You can encode it with a short description. A high-density pattern is less compressible. Its detailed behavior requires many numbers to specify. In our language, those many numbers correspond to non-trivial values of higher derivatives. And it touches pattern recognition and classification. Whether in nature or in technology, we often identify patterns by their complexity signature, the derivative fingerprint that characterizes how many levels of nuance are present. Through these connections, complexity growth becomes the bridge between the abstract derivative structure of phi and the concrete richness of patterns we see and use in the world. 7. Semantic meaning. Eloquence versus simplicity. What does semantic density mean in terms of the universe's speech? It means that not all patterns are equal in how much they say. Low-density patterns are like simple statements. Light oscillates at this frequency. This field is uniform. This object moves with constant acceleration. These are beautiful in their simplicity. The deepest laws of physics often have this flavor. Short, powerful sentences in the Holophase language. High-density patterns are like detailed narratives. This particular storm, on this particular day, twisted into this specific shape, with these precise wind patterns, interacting with this coastline. They contain far more information. The story of a turbulent cloud formation, or a complex piece of music, or the neural firing pattern underlying a memory is dense. The Holophase language does not choose one over the other. It allows both. The same infinite derivative structure can express a bare law and a detailed event. The density is chosen by the conditions, the initial state, the boundaries, the interactions, and the history. So semantic density reveals a deep truth. Reality uses one simple grammar to produce both ultra-simple laws and incredibly rich phenomena. The difference between the two is not a different language. It is a different depth of expression within the same language. 8. Stability, variability, and experimental tests. How do we know this view of complexity is more than poetry? Because it leads to clear, testable expectations. Low-density patterns, controlled mainly by first and second derivatives, tend to be stable and repeatable. A simple harmonic oscillator behaves predictably. A monochromatic wave in a uniform medium continues unchanged. These are the ground tones of the universe. High-density patterns, with many higher derivatives involved, tend to be either metastable or unstable. A finely shaped pulse in a dispersive medium can quickly lose its precise structure unless something, usually nonlinearity, actively preserves it. Complex weather patterns, turbulent flows, or delicate wave packets may either collapse back to simpler forms or require continuous feeding of energy and conditions to maintain their complexity. We can test semantic density in several ways. Prediction tests. Take a measured pattern, for example, a complex laser pulse or a neural voltage trace. Fit a model using only derivatives up to a certain order, and let that model predict the near future shape. Then fit another model that includes higher derivatives and compare the predictions to reality. If the second model performs significantly better, it shows that higher derivatives, and hence higher semantic density, are truly present. Compression tests. Try to encode a pattern with minimal data. A pure tone can be stored with just a few parameters. A turbulent signal or a detailed image requires many parameters. The more parameters you need, the higher the pattern's semantic density. In our language, those parameters correspond to contributions from many derivatives at many scales. Generation tests. Use the Holophase equations to generate patterns with only low-order initial conditions, and see that they remain simple. Then add carefully chosen higher-order initial conditions and watch more intricate behavior emerge. The ability to dial in complexity by activating higher derivatives is itself a test of the framework. If we repeatedly find that adding higher derivatives improves our predictions and our ability to generate real-world patterns, then semantic density, as derivative depth, is validated. If instead patterns always turn out to be perfectly captured with low-order derivatives, no matter how complex they look, then the holophase picture needs revision. In this way, complexity growth becomes a falsifiable scientific aspect of the language. 9. Appearance in nature, a world of different densities. Once you start looking through the lens of semantic density, the world appears as a mosaic of simple and complex regions. In flute, a pure flute note is low density, while a noisy consonant like s or a crashing wave is high density. In light, a single wavelength laser beam is low density, while sunlight scattered from leaves, water, and dust is high density, full of spatial and temporal variations. In fluids, gentle laminar flow in a smooth pipe is low density. Turbulence, with its hierarchy of eddies and swirls at many scales, is extremely high density. In landscapes, a flat desert plain is low density. A jagged mountain range with cliffs, ridges, and fine textures is high density. In biology, the regular pattern of a crystal in a bone or a simple tissue is lower density. The branching of neurons, the folding of proteins, the wiring of the brain, these are high-density patterns carved deeply into phi's derivative space. The message is simple. Complexity is not a different substance. It is a different depth of description within the same underlying field. X. Everyday analogies. Feeling density with your senses. To make this even more tangible, let's ground semantic density in everyday experience. Think of motion. Riding in a train that glides smoothly at a constant speed is a low-density experience. Your body quickly forgets the motion. Riding a roller coaster with sudden drops, sharp turns, and varying forces is a high-density experience. Your body feels the higher derivatives, the jerks, the snaps, and you cannot ignore them. Think of visuals. A blank wall or a clear blue sky has almost no detail. Your eyes slide over it without much to do. That is low spatial density. A dense forest, a city skyline, or a detailed painting gives your eyes endless edges, textures, and color gradients to explore. That is high spatial density. Think of sound. A steady hum from an air conditioner is low density. You quickly tune it out. A complex song with many instruments, changing rhythms, and emotional phrasing is high density. Your brain stays busy decoding its richness. Think of touch. Run your hand along a smooth metal railing. Few surprises, low density. Run your hand over rough stone or bark. Constant changes in texture, high density. Your fingertips are directly sensing higher spatial derivatives of the surface profile. In all these examples, your sensory system is a semantic density detector. It is constantly estimating how many derivative levels are active in the patterns around you. 11. Learning to read semantic density. After today, you can begin to consciously read semantic density in the world around you. When you hear a sound, ask, does it feel simple and repetitive or rich and changing? The richer it feels, the more higher derivatives of phi in time are at work. When you look at a scene, ask, is it smooth and uniform or detailed and textured? The more edges and fine structure you see, the higher the spatial semantic density. When you move or are moved, in a car, an elevator, an amusement ride, feel. Is the motion smooth or full of subtle jolts and changes? Those jolts are your body detecting higher time derivatives of position. A simple practice is to compare extremes: a pure tone versus a complex chord, a blank page versus a detailed drawing, a gentle escalator versus a jerky bus ride. In each pair, you can feel the difference in density. Over time, this becomes intuitive. You recognize not just what is happening, but how deeply it is written into phi's derivative language. 12. Back to phi. One field, infinite eloquence. We end, as always, by returning to phi. Complexity growth does not mean that reality suddenly uses a different substance or a different field. It simply means phi is using more of its own potential. Phi is the single cyclic field. Its first derivatives create time, space, and motion. Its second derivatives create acceleration, curvature, and the first level of nuance. Its third, fourth, and higher derivatives create a ladder of ever finer refinements. A simple pattern is one where phi answers only the first few questions in this ladder. A complex pattern is one where phi answers many of these questions simultaneously. The infinite derivative towers are phi's palette. Low-density patterns are like paintings made with a few basic colors. High-density patterns are like masterpieces using subtle shades and intricate blends. But the paint is always the same, phi. The canvas is always the same, space-time. Only the depth of expression changes. This reveals a profound unity. The universe's capacity for infinite complexity emerges naturally from the infinite differentiability of a single underlying movement. Phi, asked, "How are you changing?" can answer again and again, "How is that change changing?" without end. From that endless chain, all richness arises. 13. Closing movement. The infinite gradient of meaning. As we close part 17, we can now see higher order semantics in a unified way. We met the higher derivatives, jerk, snap, and their spatial analogs, as new letters high up the towers. We saw how they combine into envelope evolution, shaping traveling packets. And now we understand why they matter. They allow phi to speak with different levels of complexity, from the simplest laws to the richest phenomena. Semantic density is the measure of how far up the towers a pattern climbs. It is the height of a pattern story in the master tree. A short climb yields simple patterns. A long climb yields intricate ones. The same language supports both. In our next part, we will begin a majestic ascent of one of these towers in full. We will step into the temporal tower, infinite time nuance. We will start from the steady beat of omega, walk up through alpha, jerk, and snap, and see how time itself becomes a richly structured dimension of meaning. But for now, hold this understanding. The world speaks in a gradient of eloquence. From the soft hum of a single tone to the roaring complexity of a storm, from the smooth arc of a pendulum to the turbulent twist of a hurricane, it is all one field, phi, using more or less of its infinite vocabulary. Whenever you hear a richly textured sound, whenever you see a highly detailed scene, whenever you feel a complex, shifting motion, you are witnessing high semantic density. You are listening to phi speak an elaborate sentence. You are reading a dense paragraph in the book of reality. And among all these patterns, you, your thoughts, your memories, your feelings, are among the most semantically dense structures phi has yet written. You are one of its longest, richest, and most beautiful stories. Salam and peace be upon you until part 18.